talking of amazing, here we have really interesting next session. Living longer with mobile. Is the healthcare the killer wearable app? Maybe it is the first hit category for the wearable sector. It's estimated to be worth around $30 billion by 2018. And really, healthcare and apps and wearables are affecting everything, and we're measuring everything that we possibly can: our sleep, our body temperature, our diet, our eyes, our heart. But also, actually, incredibly, I just wanted to sort of, in this day of talking about monetization and revenue, and there's a company here that we're about to put on stage, which is Glow, who recently announced that they facilitated 10,000 pregnancies. And in this sort of, commercial world we live in, that is just amazing. So that's 10,000 families that have been directly affected by what they're doing. I just wanted to call them out. I think it's just a moment in time that I think is incredible. So with that, I wanted to invite Owen Thomas, Editor-in-Chief of ReadWrite. He's an avid runner, writes a ton of stuff about this space, and all the panelists. And obviously, in a very recent announcement from Nike to sort of kill the fuel ban, should make for an interesting discussion. So welcome on stage. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I'd like to welcome our panelists. We have Andrew Rosenthal from Jawbone, Stephanie Telenius, who is an advisor to MyFitnessPal, Shobert Cheveri of Pebble, and Mike Huang of Glow. Welcome, everyone. Let's get started. So we're talking about living longer with mobile, but we are wondering if the wearable industry has legs this week because of the news that Nike is cutting back on fuel ban. There are layoffs in the division, questions about whether they're going to release a device. Is this a wearable problem, or is this a Nike problem?
Well, I mean, Nike's always had wearables, right?
So that's true.
They were the first. I think Nike is a software company, and at the end of the day, the fuel score. I wear a Nike fuel band, so I'm kind of bummed. The fuel score is what really matters to me. So, for example, I do CrossFit, and it's like one of the only devices of all the devices I have on that actually will get a push-up or a burpee instead of just a run. So I think the fuel score is really valuable, and I think what Nike will do is integrate with other devices, maybe even Jawbone or Apple, and they'll use the fuel score, and they'll keep Nike running in all the software apps. And that's how they'll play in the game. I mean, they're at every sport. So I imagine that they've said, we're going to focus on software, not hardware.
Any other thoughts on Nike? I mean, personally, I try a lot of these devices. I looked at the fuel band, and I had questions about the fuel score, just whether it was something that would work for me. And it seems like these all of these devices are kind of have a really specific idea. They're kind of an integrated stack, and like that creates simplicity for consumers, but it makes it a little hard to compare. I think consumers have an overabundance of choice in wearables right now.
Look how many you have on.
Let's see. So right now I've got Chobert's happy. He's smiling because I've got a Pebble. This is a LifeTrack Solutron device, which does heart rate. And then Andrew just hooked me up with a Jawbone Up 24, which is the wireless version. So one thing that I'll note about all of these is they kind of have a fitness orientation, and yet it seems like the bigger opportunity is to improve our health. Why is the industry kind of focused on fitness right now?
I mean, at Jawbone, we're very focused on the things that make you feel better, the things that help you hit your goals. So for a lot of people, that's waking up in the morning feeling beautiful, right? And that could be driven by having gotten in a lot of steps the day before. Or it could be driven by having gotten really sound sleep at night. Or maybe just waking up with vibration on your wrist that doesn't wake up your partner, rather than a loud, blaring alarm. So we look at those things, movement, sleep, nutrition, as the fundamental building blocks of what makes life better. And from there, you can get to things like health, and you can get to things like activity. But at Jawbone, we're focusing on the softer side, what makes life better.
But the industry right now, if you look at the dollars that are going into wearables, I think the current market size is $9 to $10 billion. So Richard referenced the industry tripling in just a few years to $30 billion. But something like 95 to 97% of that spending is going to fitness-oriented devices.
The fitness folks are the early adopters.
Right.
So there's like $3 trillion of high-income individuals that really care about their fitness, and they have gym memberships, and they'll do anything to stay fit. So it's natural that they would be the early adopters. But I think the real win is healthcare, longer term, but these devices aren't sophisticated enough. I mean, if I could get heart rate and blood pressure and glucose from my wrist, well, then you're starting to talk about health. And I think that will come.
I just want to echo something that Stephanie said a little earlier. I think ultimately, the collecting data, I think all these devices does a wonderful job, right? Because what you do with the data, the software side, return the goods kind of information back to the user, ultimately that's what it really matters. So let's say in Glow, in the context of fertility, growing up, we all know how not to get pregnant, right, and get pregnant, right? So now, let's say when you try to get pregnant, we have all this kind of information and data being collected by these wonderful devices, but not a very good way to kind of put all this information in the software side, extract these kind of data, and put tangible, actionable information or intelligence back to you. So I think that's where a lot of key differentiation will come in terms of helping people in this particular space.
Yeah, Mike, I mean, I think you're right on. I think it's what you do with the data. At this point, wearables have been around for a while. I mean, if you went to the Consumer Electronics Show in January, you could walk up and down the aisles and see all this junk, all these things tracking stuff. And at the end of the day, tracking's table stakes. That shouldn't be what people are excited about anymore. What matters, what differentiates companies in the market and products is what you do with the data. And at Jawbone, we believe that there's a continuum between health and wellness and traditional healthcare, like you mentioned. I mean, if you're a patient of Kaiser, I don't know how many people here have Kaiser health insurance, but if you visit a doctor at Kaiser, that doctor on his or her screen is supposed to ask you how active you are. And that's part of that physician's evaluation about how they're doing with their patients. And they're supposed to ask you how you're sleeping. And if you look at chronic disease, the best advice that spans all the different major areas of chronic disease is around how you eat, your activity, and your sleep. So it's all part of the same story. It just, in the past, sleep was unknowable. We never had any data. Now we're starting to get data, and companies like Jawbone and Glow and others are starting to figure out what you can do with it that helps users with whatever their goals are, weight loss or recovery from a disease, or simply waking up feeling more beautiful in the morning.
So I actually come from the mobile app world, and to just keep it in simple context, the last 5 years or so, it's been an exciting ride to try applications like these fitness apps on mobile. But the thing about many of these companies, they're software focused, and as a consumer, once I started to wear one of these wearable devices, I really saw the impact. And so I feel like many of these companies relied on the next kind of wave, right? And those consumers as well. So when you have companies like Runkeeper and others who are primarily a software-based platform, their core competency is that. So like Pebble is a very open-ended platform for them to come on, as well as Jawbone and others, for these guys to come and share their community this hardware to get a deeper experience. So now I could go for a run. I don't feel like I have to carry my phone in the long term. It could be on the side, and I could just check it while I'm running the information that I really need. Kind of the thing that our core competency is just simplicity is key. So for a basic runner right now, like fitness and things of that nature, I think the simplicity for these activities are the key factor right now.
But the ultimate simplicity might just be using the phone, right? Simon earlier talked about the phone being the ultimate wearable, since we have it on our bodies so much of the time. There was a whole category of devices, actually, that sort of existed to facilitate run tracking. And then as better GPS got into iOS and Android devices, you saw Runkeeper, Runtastic, Map My Run. I could go on. There are like 10 of these running apps out there. But they all now use phone GPS, and they don't really need an auxiliary device. Where is that sweet spot going to exist for wearables that they really add value and kind of justify their space on your body?
So what we are seeing as very interesting is we kind of everybody's been talking about contextual lifestyle and what's going on, right? So the basic functionality that we differentiate is the accelerometer, very much what the iOS and Android have. And so, for example, we see very unique applications that track things like your workout, like push-ups, sit-ups, so dynamic stuff. So if you're a baseball pitcher, there's an application that could track how fast you pitch a baseball. If you're a batter, or you want to check out your golf swing, there's very dynamic ways to kind of measure how well you do that. So we're seeing kind of the next steps.
And Shibya, this is, just so I understand, this is taking the accelerometer data from your wrist.
That's right.
So, and that's obviously very different from the accelerometer data from the phone in your pocket.
Yes.
And much richer.
That's right. So, I don't know if you guys are seeing kind of information that route, but we feel that this is kind of the first steps towards, understanding who you are in the long term, which is like the fitness to health mentality.
And I think it's about more than accelerometers, though, right? I mean, body temperature matters, heart rate, your stress level. There are a lot of things the phone's never going to be able to measure well. And as you said, if you earn the right, if you're on someone's wrist, you kind of need to earn the right to stay there. And I think a lot of the focus, a lot of the differentiation in the marketplace will be what companies do to provide really useful analysis to help users understand their data, but then also to help people hit those goals and change their behavior. And having sensors on the body is part of it, but also having a point of contact for silent vibration, or having the ability for hardware to serve as identification as you move throughout the world. We see a lot of the interest now around what we call the Internet of Me. It's the Internet of Things made real. And that can't all happen by a phone that's left on your desk or in a woman's handbag or runs out of power in the middle of the day.
So how do we get all this data and turn it into insights and turn those insights into recommendations? Recommendations that we really trust, not my phone buzzing and telling me to go for a run because it's Wednesday.
I mean, given Glow's a data science company, we just take that data science view perspective, right? I think the ultimate you have to ask, what are some of the valuable problems you're trying to solve, right? You're exactly right. How many times can you view, go run this morning, right? You slept well last night. You didn't sleep well last night. Yeah, right, because I stayed up late watching TV. That's the reason I didn't sleep well. All those things, I don't think in long term give you any kind of tangible value, right? But if you're saying, if the ways I can track how well you sleep, how well you eat, ultimately that correlates to your probability of developing heart disease, or let's say preventing cancer in some form one or another, right? Those are extremely valuable because that's in our interest to live a different lifestyle to prevent that from happening. This is why I think the goal of technology, such as quantified self, really kicks in, right? And just also kind of comment to your comment earlier about phone is kind of all the end and one be all the device. I actually disagree. I actually think in 5 years, maybe some of these devices you can't even see it, probably implanted in your skin somewhere. We're actually seeing technology today is kind of like a tape, right, in your skin, so you don't really feel it, and ultimately collect a whole bunch of data that you even notice. So anyway, differentiation, I think, at the end of the day, is apply this mass amount of data, which will be very cheap to get, applied to tangible problem that not only is good for your personal health, and ultimately is good for society. For example, lower the overall cost of healthcare, right, and change your way to live.
These devices are definitely first generation, and 1 in 10 people are wearing them. So there's definitely, people care about their health. And I agree with Mike, there's gonna be like 150 million sensors within 5 years, and it might be an MC10 that you might wear on your wrist, or it might be a Proteus pill, or there's gonna be numerous examples where you're gonna take all this data and it'll go into the cloud, and then you'll have services that will help you live a better life. And it is about healthcare. I mean, of the 2.8 trillion that we spend in this country on healthcare, 70% of it's from chronic conditions. 70 million people are polychronic. They live every day with some kind of heart disease, obesity, cancer, arthritis, COPD, CHF. I mean, these are real issues, and they're all manageable if you have the right data and the right infrastructure and advice to help avoid them and manage them.
And yet, these people are sort of hard to reach, I think. The current wearable industry is not really targeting them. I don't think it's really giving them a reason. I think a lot of people who are struggling with health problems, they kind of hide, right? They don't want to talk to their doctor. They don't want to talk to their family about what they're going through. So how do we draw them out and bring this benefit to them?
So, well, I would look at the current system. You look at the healthcare system today, not to take any side politically. So I view it as kind of waterbed effect, right? You basically push the cost down one side, but cost will go up the other side, right? That's not really the way to address this kind of cost issue. At the end of the day, you're asking, what would make me care to track all this, right? Well, what if I say your performance directly correlate how much healthcare costs you pay for your health insurance, for example? That in itself, the interest is perfectly aligned with you want to be healthy and reduce the cost for this healthcare system which has a tremendous burden to the economy today for our country, certainly, right? So I think that's a good way to kind of be aware of how do you tackle this kind of problem.
I agree. I think it's an incentive problem, right? So there's numbers that suggest like the average American family costs the system like $20,000 a year in healthcare, but they don't pay it. Right? I mean, it's like a car. I mean, think about it. Your home, your car, and healthcare are probably the biggest expenses, but you don't pay it. But that's all changing. So in the next decade, consumers are going to pay more and more. And you can see Target and Genentech and big companies pulling back and forcing high deductible plans and then creating incentives for people to be healthy. You're seeing insurance companies take advantage of these wellness, or self-insured employers taking advantage of the $3,000 a year budget from insurance companies to promote wellness. And so you're starting to see consumer behavior in healthcare, and it's going to take a while, but I think consumers will directly have an aligned incentive so that they will actually change their behavior because they'll have lower costs associated with that.
Just add a color to, just not add an example to what Stephanie just said. So if you look at fertility, that's obviously one area I'm very interested in. And average IVF cost is about $20,000 per cycle. Right, that's about 50% of a disposable income for average American households. It's very expensive, and it doesn't even guarantee that you have a baby, right? And most people, whether they watch their health in context of fertility or not, if they don't, then they're faced with this very expensive correction event. Then what if I tell you if there's a device that you can wear on yourself and will give you a tremendous amount of value in terms of data science and give you a lot of information back how you should take care of your fertile health, then you can conceive naturally with the probability of increased by a certain percentage. That in itself is basically you're changing your habit to prevent this very expensive correction event. So fertility, that's an example, but you can apply that to cardiovascular disease, diabetes, anything else, right? So if you can change people's understanding of the incentive structure, the quantified self-interest movement will be massive. Everybody will adopt it.
So, in that case, it's a very extreme kind of financial incentive. IVF is not always covered.
It's not. Out of 50 states, only one required.
Well,
and it's only one cycle. Right.
And Glow is actually offering its own kind of private insurance, right?
It's an insurance program. It's not insurance yet, but we do find a way to defray the cost of this kind of very expensive, optional, which is not covered by insurance events. Yeah.
And have you found that incentive is actually working in terms of bringing people in?
I like to think so.
Okay. 10,000 babies say yes.
In less than 6 months. So we just released last August. What we do is really leverage all the information, and we partner with Jawbone as well to collect information such as temperature, your movement, obviously calorie burn, even with MyFitnessPal, which Stephanie is very closely involved with, to take a look at nutrition, right? So all this information we can try to gather in terms of understanding what are some of the things most correlated to your fertile health. And this doesn't really just apply to those who are trying to get pregnant. Even as young as women who have no desire to get pregnant right now is applicable, right? Because it's making a habit change to prevent some very expensive event from happening. I think that's really the theme what we're talking about here. How do you make that incentive structure happen so these devices plus understanding of data can help you live a lifestyle that can benefit you and also the financial system for the long run.
Owen, I think the theme that we're seeing now is that what Mike's touching on is behavior change is really hard, but good design makes it easier. And 3, 4, 5 years ago, there wasn't that good design in the consumer health and wellness space the way there is now. I mean, you had insurance companies that were sending their members and employers sending their members crappy, plastic pedometers that they were supposed to wear around. No one did it. Now we have insurance companies coming to us saying people are walking into the doctor's office, they're walking into our employers wearing bands that they paid $150 for at the Apple store. How can we possibly get access to that data? So the tables have shifted, and it's because of design. And our bet is that good design is what gets people engaged from the beginning. And then you use partnerships, you use data, you use interaction to drive continued value to the user over the course of his or her life cycle.
So how do we get that data out there where it needs to be? I mean, if my insurer has a partnership with Fitbit, but I'm wearing a Jawbone up, that's a problem for me. And I'm not really sure who to blame, but I'm probably going to be a little angry at everyone. How do we make sure the industry has the right kind of openness?
I mean, at Jawbone, we really embrace openness. We have a fully open developer platform with people, hundreds of developers worldwide, building their own products and services on top of the APIs, on top of the data that we have. And frankly, Nike had a very different approach. Nike believed in a closed ecosystem. And if you look at where the interesting applications are coming from, they're at the edges, they're at the partnerships. They're from data that you would never even think about using. I mean, we've got people building applications that bring in your driving data, data about your pet's activity. I mean, obviously working with Glow is really exciting for a lot of users. So it's about openness, and it's about building good, scalable infrastructure like MyFitnessPal has done.
No, Stephanie, MyFitnessPal has taken a different approach. They have a private API. You need to strike a partnership and agree. But I think it's hard to argue that, what are the numbers, 45 million users?
So they have over 50 million users, and
over 50 million
essentially 80% of wearables are integrated with MyFitnessPal, and millions of people have integrated with at least one wearable. So their philosophy is open. It's just that the structure is different, like for their partnership with Jawbone and their partnership with Glow. It's just they have to make sure they're transferring the data in the right way that's understandable. It's a lot of detailed nutrition data. But it's very easy to get a partnership with them. And I think they're the largest fitness and diet database. I mean, they have over 4 million items out there, and I mean, it's a crowdsourced database, so they've been growing it for years and years, and nutrition is so nuanced, which is why it's useful to so many other apps.
And Shabir, you have something like 15,000 developers?
We have now, scaled in tens of thousands of developers, so 3x since we've went live 3 months ago. And
do you have a sense, I know that health and fitness is one of your biggest categories, but speaking to Andrew's point about the interesting cases being on the edges, what are you seeing people building on Pebble?
So it's interesting. We see in and around majority of our users actually use a healthcare app right away. It's a health product related, so running, biking, that type of thing. It's one of the first that they actually add. We've noticed that both iOS and Android primarily use it. So for example, iOS and Android, it's skewed. Actually, we see almost a double effect of almost all the iOS users use a fitness-based application. Vice versa, on Android, we see only little usage of fitness applications. So it's interesting to see that. We've always also had a very open atmosphere for developers, so very transparent, allowing the developers to share data between what they've collected internally with us and themselves, and seeing what's the high touch points, where specifically does a user engage the Pebble when they're using it for fitness. This is one of those devices that you could go, again, for a swim, and while you're swimming, where's the most effective way you could swim? If you're doing a swim meet for a high school athlete, we give that type of data to that developer who has actually developed that. And then we're very open if, like, for example, we know everybody's specialists, so if there is organizations that are working directly with the medical world and doctors, we're in talks with them, a lot of them, in sharing data and resources, so we're open to that as well.
So Glow is a developer. In this case, we're definitely enjoy the openness of getting data. But I think even the bigger question here, what we actually need to ask is, how secure and private are these data, right? Open's great, but how can we ensure the privacy so that way user entrusted this kind of information to us, we can honor that trust and give information back to them without compromising anything they don't want to compromise. For example, they certainly don't want to let their employer or friends find out they're trying to get pregnant if they're not really trying to, or some other issues, right? So I think that's probably as a responsibility of developers and also as a platform, we cannot take that lightly. Being open, also secure and private. I think that's also important to address.
So there are lots of concerns, lots of issues for the industry to consider. Do you have a wish list for the industry? If one thing that you would like to get from the wearables, from the wearable makers or app developers, everyone you partner with, interact with, what's going to make the difference? What's going to treble this industry in size in the next few years?
So for us, obviously, the accelerometer calculating whether your calorie burns or whatnot, they're very relevant, right? Because your chance of conceiving is directly relevant to your BMI, your weight. But the temperature, actually a lot of different information is highly correlated to fertility, at least we think. So if I can have a wish list, I would definitely wish for these devices not only track things that we track today, but things that are much, much harder to track passively. For example, diet data that MyFitnessPal does a great job in tracking. Maybe one day with a device you can put, I don't know, in your teeth somewhere, so as you eat, you will know exactly what you ate, nutritional value, how that correlates to your chance of, your fertility, right? So we'll always talk about if you drink a lot of Mountain Dews, that would decrease your sperm count, or is that true? I don't know. I mean, I don't want to start drinking or not. So
if that study comes out, you'll see
the richness of
crash in
information to
sales.
collect. I think that's what my wish list would be.
I think it's just creating products that people want and really just caters to them. So it's interesting to see, people are creating products that just trace your heartbeat. I'm a big fan of fitness products that help me kind of accelerate my body mass index, right? And so the guys who created the app is a very interesting product where it looks like it's armor, like an armor all, where basically with tracking devices all over their body. So what kind of data points when I'm hitting the gym is really useful for me to improve, where I could improve on at the weights and at, maybe playing sports, certain effects.
Let's see, I would like calorie intake and output. So real calories, true calories burned, heart rate variability, blood pressure, and even glucose.
Heart rate variability is a huge one. If someone can crack that, then they really have some great data to improve our health.
Yeah.
I think at Jawbone, we want to continue to see people build interesting products and services and to be creative. I mean, one of the products that we saw come out recently, when you use your Jawbone up and you wake up in the morning, instead of just tracking your sleep, it wakes your entire house up. It turns on the lights, it turns on your coffee maker. I mean, this stuff's really exciting, and this is far beyond the traditional narrow mindset around healthcare and even around health and wellness. And it's these types of applications that are going to keep people engaged. That's the reason people are going to go out and buy a new product to put on their wrist, because it does something useful for them. And if it makes them healthier, great. If it makes them wake up feeling more beautiful and more excited and more focused, like we found with people who sleep better, even better.
So I think what we're seeing is that the wearables market is set to grow for a number of reasons. It's not just about fitness, it's not just about health, it's also about the benefit to your life overall. And that's going to kind of weave together into a strong rationale for consumers to adopt these devices. So I think that's a great takeaway. Thank you all for listening, and thanks to our great panel for taking the time.
Thank you, everyone.